Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report. And of course, this is day 2 of the Breeders' Cup World Thoroughbred Championships. We're going to quickly get into, some of the picks on day 2 of this championship series. The Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint kicks things off at 2:55 mid-afternoon Eastern Standard. And Covfefe for Brad Cox is the prohibitive favorite in here. But I think there's a couple horses that you can use. Don't really have a trifecta really sort of in mind, but I do think that Selcourt has not been as good after some, in emboldened battles with Marley's Freedom. She hasn't been as good in 2019, but she's running at her home track, and I think she'll like the situation, the setup. And I think she's a horse she could possibly use. Bellafina's been shortening up ever since she failed in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly. She went back on the Kentucky Oaks Trail, failed at the Oaks again. 0 for 2 at Churchill. She's been good in the middle, the middle distance races. Don't know if this is really the best spot for. One thing about it is maybe a good move for Simon Callahan's trainee to cut back in distance. I'm just not so sure if she wants to deal with all this speed. But she is a horse that I have a question mark around. Could be the X factor of the X factors in that race. Covfefe definitely the horse to beat. You certainly need to use those horses, but I do think Selcourt and perhaps Spice Perfection out of Peter Miller's barn. We know he's been a bit of a giant killer at Santa Anita in particular. Very effective with horses with speed, and she's getting a price, so I think that's another horse you can use, the 9 or perhaps the 7 Selcourt out of John Sadler's barn. Moving on to the Breeders' Cup Sprint, moving on to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This race, of course, is going to feature Stormy Liberal going for the 3-peat, so that's kind of the feature there. But I really want to get into the big ass fans Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Omaha Beach is the feature there. He's going to face his rival Improbable, whom he defeated in the Arkansas Derby to garner Kentucky Derby favoritism. You've got him in there. You've got the stakes, graded stakes winner Cold Front for Todd Pletcher, and a couple of other horses, a couple of the 3-year-olds, Mr. Money, who's cutting back to a distance that I think he certainly likes after proving himself in the Pat Day Mile on the Derby Day undercard. In addition to his races just a touch beyond the 8 furlongs, the Matt Winn and the Indiana Derby. He was good in the West Virginia Derby, didn't get the greatest ride after being wrangled back after inheriting the lead when the speed didn't develop in the Pennsylvania Derby. He should have been allowed to run, and it may not have made any difference, but I think some people believe that he could have won that race had he been ridden a little differently. He gets the mile distance, and as long as the tactics are solid at a distance that we know he likes, and if he can handle Santa Anita, he could be very live in here. My picks are pretty simple. I do have Omaha Beach as a win bet at 8-5 odds on the morning line. The number 2, Improbable, at getting over his gate quirks and finally putting together a complete race. The number 4, that would be Mr. Money. And then the number 7, Cold Front. That's one of my picks. The pick that I really like is Cold Front, being a horse. I think he can spring the upset. I'm not absolutely saying this with, as I said, overwhelming overconfidence. But the 7, the 5, Omaha Beach second, the number 4, maybe Mr. Money finishing third, and then Giant Expectations, a veteran campaigner hitting the board out of the number 1 hole. The 7, the 5, the 4, the 1. Those are horses that I think that could be used in here for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. As far as the Filly and Mare Turf goes, Sister Charlie she's won 6 graded stakes in a row. She's going to run against a couple of horses that could be very interesting in here. Fleeting, of course, was very good when finishing a very close third in the Epsom Oaks. Probably the best race of her career. She's had a little bit of bad luck. Didn't run as well against Sister Charlie in Chicago in the Arlington, in the Beverly D, in the Arlington as the co-feature with the Arlington Million. She's out of the Aidan O'Brien barn. She's getting a price here at about 6-1. Maybe not the ultimate price for a horse that has not. A lot of people are still high on her. That's probably why the odds are where they are. I think when it comes to numbers, Villa Marina is very interesting. She's at 8-1. I think most people would like to pull the trigger at a higher price, but she could fill your exotic. She won the prestigious Arc Day or Arc Weekend Prix Del Opera at the 1.5 miles. This 1.25 miles is probably a little short for her, so she comes in sharp. If not, but again, it could be argued that she may be, a touch off or having a little bit of regression. But she should run very, very well in here. It'll be interesting to see how she handles the turf at Santa Anita. But I think that those horses are kind of like the alternative or the filler behind Sister Charlie if you believe she's unbeatable. And I do have the 2, the 7, which would be Vasilika, who's been very good on the West Coast. She gets a home game here in this Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. the 2, the 7, Vasilika. The number 12, that would be Fanny Logan, a horse who's lightly raced, very talented, has been nothing but perfect in her starts, maybe at the slightly lower level over in Britain, but she is a horse that comes under the same banner in terms of connections as Enable, taking her place, or at least trying to, and that would be Frankie Dettori riding the horse and John Gosden being the conditioner. She is a horse that's getting a lot of buzz, getting a little more play than Just Wonderful, who's had some battles with horses like Fleeting and various others for Aidan O'Brien. William Buick is riding her. She's at 20-1, and that's a horse that some people are going to jump on. But my picks are pretty, straightforward. Sister Charlie, the number 7, perhaps Vasilika, the number 12, that would be Fanny Logan, and the number 1. But I also have the number 3, Fleeting, pulling the upset over Sister Charlie as an exacta box, a 3-2. So there's different, alliterations and variations on that filly and mare turf theme. I think Sister Charlie's going to be hard to beat, but I do think there's a couple horses, Fleeting, chief among them, maybe Fanny Logan, that can do something, but don't go to sleep on Vasilika. She may be a little better than anyone thinks, and I also do like Villa Marina, and she's one of those horses you can slot in, the 3, the 2, the 8, to beat Sister Charlie, or be the 8, the 2, the 3, or the 8, the 3, the 2. So she's a horse at the number 8 slot, getting 8-1 odds. She might get a higher, a higher number for those who just don't think a horse coming from over there can have any impact. So that's the filly and mare turf featuring Sister Charlie. Then, when you start looking at some of these other great races, you've got the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We all know that's arguably the best race on the card. I think it probably is the most eagerly anticipated one, certainly right up there with the Distaff and the Classic. You've got all these great horses in here, and I think that it's going to be very, very, what I said, beyond nuclear. This is going to be like the great vortex, the black hole, because somebody's going to have to be sent. Imperial Hint is coming out of the 9 hole in this 10-horse field. He's going to be sent. Can he rate? Then you, of course, have Chancelot coming out of the number 6 at 4-1 odds. He's got a great post. He should be able to break nicely, get a good position. Then you have Matoli. And then you have Engage, and you have all these horses that have speed. And that's why I think it sets it up for a couple other horses. I think Matoli is going to run his race, even though he was shellacked by Imperial Hint in the Vosburg. In the Albert G. Vanderbilt at Saratoga, prior to him redeeming himself in the Forego after, winning the Met Mile. So I think Matoli's, probably I think it's pretty dead even in terms of how those two horses are coming in. My belief is they may both get cooked in here, but something's telling me Matoli is going to run well. Imperial Hint, if he freaks like he did at Saratoga again, that's the key. Can he take his show on the road? And I think that's been the biggest thing, although this track mirrors perhaps maybe what he's run on in New York. But that's where, Hog Creek Hustle and Catalina Cruiser are the picks that I like in here. I do have the 2 Hog Creek Hustle beating the number 4. That would be Matoli, who will run his race, I believe. The number 6, Chancelot, who I think will run well. And then, you can put in the number 1, which would be Catalina Cruiser finishing 4th. My other pick is Catalina Cruiser winning it with the Hog Creek Hustle 2nd. And then the number 9, Imperial Hint, for the show, and then the number 4, Matoli. You can flip flop those numbers. I got 1, 2, 9, 4. You could go 1, 2, 4, 9. You could go 1, 4, 9. You get the picture. And then, of course, I have both Matoli and Imperial Hint as win bets as well. The 4, the 9, you can use the 4, the 7, the 3, the 1, or the 9, which would be Imperial Hint, the 9, the 7, the 3, the 1. My ultimate pick, though, I like Hog Creek Hustle. I like those 20-1 odds. Even if you chop them in half, he'll be at 10-1. And I'm telling you, he's got a kick to him. He should be fresh. He is running against, upgraded competition. This is a tough spot. And some people believe that Catalina Cruiser, and shortening up to the 6 furlongs, is really, really climbing a Mount Everest, climbing a mountain a little too steep against these horses. But I think he's going to be able to get that pace that he wants, and I think he's going to kick in. And between 1 or 2, if not both of them, I think is going to win this one. That's just my view. But those are numbers that at your use or not use at your discretion. The Breeders' Cup Sprint to be run at 5:36. Then, of course, we have the Breeders' Cup Mile on the turf. Some interesting horses. Uni is in there. A couple fillies. Uni and I think Got Stormy are in there. So that's very interesting. There are a number of horses you can use. Circus Maximus at 3-1. I kind of think Got Stormy and Uni, are a little bit too favored. So you got to try to find another horse. Meantime, while you try to do that, let's focus in on the Distaff, a race that I feel a little more comfortable getting into the meat and potatoes of. I believe that we're going to get something of a radioactive barbecue in this race as well, because if Paradise Woods out of the 1, and if Serengeti Empress out of the 9 comes out the way that we expect them to, and then you've got Secret Spice coming out of the 7, that's going to be a speed duel. It's going to be a key to one of those riders believing we can take back, we can be stalk and pounce, play that role, be the first run on these closing horses and have a shot in here. And I think Paradise Woods has a good chance to do that. Maybe Serengeti Empress, who has won at 1 mile and 1/8, winning the Kentucky Oaks, maybe she can have the ability to, professionally be able to be relaxed. But I just see her coming out of there, coming out of a post position that's wide. And I think Paradise Woods has a chance. She has been a bit of an enigma, but John Sheriff's the trainer of Zenyatta, Manastique, and some of these other great horses, I think has an opportunity. I think that she's a horse that I think that she's in pretty good form, and I think she has a shot in here. I think she likes the racetrack. I don't think it'll be much different on this day. And, of course, I love Street Band in here. I think Street Band wants extra distance, but the same could be said for the horse that beat her in the Alabama Dunbar Road. The 1 mile and 1/8 is just too short for a lot of these fillies, and regardless of whether you think 1 mile and 1/8 or 1 mile and 1/4 is the best trip, the Breeders' Cup Distaff should be 1 mile and 1/4. This race is exemplary, exemplifies that. So, but I like Street Band coming from off of it. I do have Paradise Woods in one win scenario with the 3 Street Band, the number 6. That would be Wildcat, who I think ran much better in the Beldame. If Midnight Bisou, if that was her best, which a lot of people don't think that it was, that Midnight Bisou's got the 15th gear that's going to leave Wildcat way in the dust. That could be true. Or it could be collectively both of those horses are bouncing, and you might want to stay away from them, or you're going to use them on the bottom end of your exotics, or wager in another way against them, even if you decide to use them as a win bet. I think Wildcat's race was very good. It could be argued she was all out. She has nothing left, but something tells me that she'll get a good setup, and I think she's going to run solid in here. Can't really say for sure, but she is in a couple of my exotics in here. Again, I have the 1, I have the 3, which is, of course, Street Band, the number 6 Wildcat, and the number 5, and that would be Dunbar Road. I'm not really crazy about her. I think she wants 1 mile and 1/4. Her race in the Spinster makes you worry a little bit, but it could be argued. It was a prep, and, maybe they'll slot right into the surface at Santa Anita. The distance won't be a problem. While others are struggling, they're thriving, and I think Dunbar Road fits that mold. I do have the number 4 Midnight Bisou winning this race, with the number 5 Dunbar Road actually kicking in, and the number 11 Blue Prize running a big race, and then the number 6 Wildcat herself, where it's a little bit more of a dominant race between the older horses and Dunbar Road being the 1-3-year-old. But something tells me that Street Band is going to run well. I think Paradise Woods is the X factor. I think this reminds me a little bit of the year in which Sightseek was supposed to run off after the showdown with Azeri. Basically got canceled when Azeri defected, had an issue. Reminds me a little bit when Riboletta was on that win streak and beat really a Hall of Fame horse in Beautiful Pleasure quite easily, coming into the Distaff as a Horse of the Year candidate. She and Beautiful Pleasure bombed as Spain won at 50-1, beating her more highly regarded stablemate Surfside, both trained by Wayne Lucas. That's what I think this sets up as. I don't know if Serengeti Empress can do what Adoration did on that day to beat Sightseek, which she was heavily favored, where she held off Elo Love and Lady Tact, trained by Steve Asmussen. I think Ron Ellis was the trainer of Elo Love. And David Hoffman's, of course, trained the winner. I'm just not sure if it's going to be Serengeti Empress. I feel more confident it could be Paradise Woods, maybe going literally almost gate to wire in a stalk and pounce and giving none of the closers an opportunity to put a dent in her lead or not enough to pass her. That's what I see happening in here, but I really like the idea that either between Wildcat and particularly Street Band, maybe Dunbar Road can pick up some pieces, because I do think there's going to be a legitimate pace. Again, my win picks are Paradise Woods and Street Band, 1, 3, 6, 5, or the 3, the 1, the 6, the 5. That 3 hole, of course, is where Street Band is coming out of. So, basically use or not use these numbers at your discretion. That is the Longines Breeders' Cup Distaff at Santa Anita. Then, of course, the Breeders' Cup Turf, of course, is extremely interesting as well. We'll get into that as we continue to cover the Breeders' Cup World Thoroughbred Championships Day 2.